The candles have burned down to stubs. Catherine Howard is 19 years old, and she can hear footsteps approaching her chamber at Hampton Court, footsteps that do not belong to her ladies-in-waiting, do not belong to servants bringing food or fresh linens, do not belong to anyone who should be walking these corridors at 11 o'clock at night. She was, until approximately 6 hours ago, Queen of England, wife of Henry VIII, the most powerful woman in the kingdom, a girl who had risen from obscure poverty to wear the crown that Anne Boleyn had died for and Jane Seymour had died wearing. Now she sits in her private chamber, forbidden to leave, surrounded by guards who will not meet her eyes, waiting for something she does not yet fully understand. The king has not come to see her. The king has not sent word. The king, her husband of 16 months, the man who called her his rose without a thorn, the man who showered her with jewels and praised her beauty to every ambassador in Europe, has locked himself in his own chambers and has been weeping for hours. She knows this because she can hear him. The royal apartments at Hampton Court are connected. Sound carries through walls that were built for grandeur rather than privacy. And Henry Tudor, King of England, is sobbing like a child who has discovered that the world is not what he believed it to be. The footsteps stop outside her door. A knock, formal, official, the knock of someone delivering news that cannot be avoided. "Enter," she says, and her voice does not tremble. She has learned, in 16 months, as queen, to control her voice even when her heart is racing. The door opens. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer stands in the entrance, his face arranged in an expression of pastoral concern that does not reach his eyes. Behind him, she can see guards, more guards than should be necessary for a simple visit from the Archbishop of Canterbury. "Your Majesty," Cranmer says, and the title sounds different in his mouth than it did this morning. This morning it was acknowledgement. Now it sounds like accusation. "I come on the king's business. There are matters that must be discussed. At this hour, the matters are urgent. They concern your conduct before your marriage to His Majesty, and during it." The words land like stones dropped into still water. She feels the ripples spreading outward, feels the implications settling into her understanding. Someone has talked. Someone has told. And everything she has built, everything she has survived to achieve, is about to collapse. What you are about to learn is the true story of Catherine Howard's destruction, not the execution itself, which took only seconds, but the 3 months of psychological torture that preceded it. The historians who documented Catherine Howard's fall focused on the charges adultery, treason, the betrayal of a king who had loved her. They recorded the dates of arrests, the content of confessions, the legal proceedings that transformed a queen into a condemned traitor. But they did not adequately document what those 3 months actually felt like: the isolation, the interrogations, the systematic destruction of everyone she had ever trusted, the experience of watching, day after day, as her world was dismantled piece by piece, while she waited to learn whether she would live or die. Tonight, you will learn what really happened to Catherine Howard. You will learn about the accusations that began her fall, the confessions that were extracted under pressure, the people who betrayed her, and the people who tried to save her. You will learn about the nights at Sion Abbey, the journey to the tower, the final hours before the blade fell. You will learn why what happened before her execution was worse than the execution itself. Subscribe if you want to understand the full horror of being a queen who fell from grace in Tudor England. Comment below telling me where you are watching from. Because Catherine Howard is about to face Archbishop Cranmer's questions, and I am going to tell you exactly what those questions revealed and what they cost her. But first, I need to warn you about something. Catherine Howard was probably 19 years old when she died. Some historians believe she was younger, perhaps 17. She was a teenager who had been raised in chaotic circumstances, who had experienced things that no child should experience, who had made choices that Tudor morality condemned, but that modern understanding might view very differently. What happened to her was not justice. It was the systematic annihilation of a young woman who had become inconvenient to powerful men. This is not a story with a happy ending, but it is a story that deserves to be told accurately. Let us begin. To understand what happened to Catherine Howard, you must first understand what happened to her before she became queen. Catherine was born around 1523. The exact date is uncertain because she was not considered important enough at the time for anyone to record it precisely. She was the daughter of Lord Edmund Howard, a man perpetually in debt, perpetually seeking patronage, perpetually failing to provide for his large family. Her mother died when Catherine was young. Her father shipped her off to the household of her step-grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, where she would be raised with other young relatives and taught the skills that might help her find a husband someday. The Dowager Duchess's household was, by later accounts, remarkably poorly supervised. Dozens of young people lived there, relatives, wards, servants' children. The girls slept together in a large dormitory called the Maiden's Chamber. At night, when the older women had retired and the household's supervision relaxed, things happened in that dormitory that would later destroy Catherine Howard's life. When Catherine was perhaps 13 years old, her music teacher, a man named Henry VIII, began paying her special attention. The attention escalated. Manox later testified that he had touched her intimately, that she had permitted liberties that stopped just short of full intercourse. Whether Catherine understood what was happening, whether she consented in any meaningful sense, whether a 13-year-old can consent to attention from an adult teacher, these questions were not asked by the investigators who later examined the case. What mattered to them was that Catherine Howard had been touched before her marriage to the king. After Manox, there was Francis Dereham. Dereham was a secretary in the Duchess's household, young, attractive, ambitious. He began visiting the Maiden's Chamber at night, along with other young men who had discovered that the dormitory's supervision was inadequate. He and Catherine developed a relationship that was, by all accounts, sexual. They called each other husband and wife. They exchanged gifts. They made plans for a future together. Whether this constituted a binding pre-contract of marriage which would have made Catherine's later marriage to Henry VIII invalid became a crucial legal question. Catherine would later deny that any such contract existed. Dereham would insist that it did. The truth probably lies somewhere in the complexity of a teenage relationship conducted in secret, without adult guidance, between two young people who did not fully understand the implications of their words. What matters for our story is this. By the time Catherine Howard came to the royal court at age 16 or 17, she had a past that powerful people knew about, that servants had witnessed, that could be used against her if anyone chose to investigate. And in November 1541, someone chose to investigate. Now let us return to Hampton Court, where Archbishop Cranmer is about to begin his interrogation. The Archbishop did not come alone. He brought documents, papers, covered in handwriting that Catherine could not read from across the room, but that she suspected contained testimony from people she had known, people she had trusted, people who had apparently decided that their own survival required her destruction. "Your Majesty," Cranmer began, "I must ask you about your time in the household of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, specifically about your relationships with certain men who resided or worked there. I do not understand what you mean." "I think you do." Cranmer's voice remained gentle, pastorally gentle, the tone of a priest hearing confession. "We have received testimony from multiple witnesses, testimony that describes conduct unbecoming of a maid, let alone a queen." "What witnesses?" "I am not at liberty to reveal their names at this time, but their accounts are detailed and consistent. They describe intimate contact between yourself and a man named Henry Manox. They describe a relationship of considerable intimacy with a man named Francis Dereham." He paused. "And they describe more recent conduct, Your Majesty." conduct that occurred after your marriage to the king. The last sentence struck like a physical blow. Before the marriage was one thing damaging, humiliating, but potentially survivable. The king had married her, believing her to be a virgin. Learning otherwise would wound his pride. But after the marriage, "I have done nothing improper since becoming queen," she said. "The witnesses suggest otherwise. There are accounts of private meetings with the gentleman of the king's privy chamber, a man named Thomas Culpeper. Culpeper. The name hung in the air between them. Thomas Culpeper, who had been kind to her when kindness was rare. Thomas Culpeper, who had looked at her the way Henry had once looked at her, before age and illness had made his affection more possessive than passionate. Thomas Culpeper, with whom she had... "I have had conversations with Master Culpeper," she said carefully, "as I have had conversations with many gentlemen of the court. There is nothing improper in conversation." The conversations were private. They occurred at night. They were facilitated by Lady Rochford, who kept watch while you and Master Culpeper were alone together. Cranmer's gentle tone did not change. "Tell me, Your Majesty, what requires a lookout if there is nothing improper occurring?" She had no answer. There was no answer that would satisfy him. "I will ask you to provide a full account of your conduct," Cranmer continued, "both before your marriage and during it. You may write this account yourself, or you may dictate it to a secretary. But the account must be complete. His Majesty requires complete honesty. And if my account does not match the testimony you have received, then there will be further questions. There are methods for determining truth when accounts conflict." His voice remained gentle, but the implication was clear. Torture was not typically used on women of noble birth. But there were other pressures that could be applied. And everyone she cared about, everyone who had helped her, everyone who had kept her secrets, could be subjected to methods that would make them say whatever the investigators wanted to hear. "I will write my account," she said. "Tonight. You will have it by morning. I will wait." Cranmer settled into a chair near the door. He was not leaving. He would watch her write, would take the document directly from her hands, would ensure that she had no opportunity to coordinate her story with anyone else. She was already alone. The isolation had begun. Let me stop here to explain something about Tudor interrogation, because without understanding the system Catherine was facing, you cannot understand what the next 3 months would cost her. When the Tudor state decided to investigate someone, it did not simply ask questions and accept the answers. It conducted a comprehensive examination that sought to uncover every possible fact, implicate every possible associate, construct the most damaging possible interpretation of events. The investigators would begin by gathering testimony from anyone who might have relevant information. Servants, relatives, friends, enemies. Everyone would be questioned. The questioning would be persistent, repeated, designed to catch inconsistencies and contradictions that could be exploited. Those who refused to provide useful testimony faced consequences. Minor figures might be threatened with imprisonment or loss of position. More significant figures could face charges of their own misprision of treason, concealment of information, participation in whatever crimes were being investigated. The system created overwhelming pressure to